A journey into quiet shadows of ancient Greece. Welcome to another gentle journey through the past, a quiet exploration of the hidden lives, forbidden desires, and complex relationships that once unfolded in ancient Greece. As you settle in, perhaps nestled beneath soft blankets, allow your mind to slow and drift. Tonight, we'll explore not the grand battles or heroic deeds of myth and legend, but the quieter, more intimate rhythms of daily life. The kind of life that unfolded behind closed doors, in shaded courtyards, and in the silent glances between master and servant. This is a story not of gods, but of people, of work and weariness, of power and powerlessness, of desire, duty, and control. You'll be guided through the winding streets of Athens, not as a tourist or citizen, but as an invisible observer, watching the world of house slaves, hearing the soft murmur of conversation at symposia, and glimpsing the subtle games of intimacy and dominance in the ancient home. Let your imagination settle. Picture warm stone walls, the scent of olive oil and hearth smoke in the air, and the gentle clinking of pottery. There is no need to hurry. The past waits patiently. Now, imagine yourself stepping quietly into an Athenian household, where the sun barely filters through the lattice windows, and where life, for many, was defined by the will of others. Let us begin. Segment 1. Why it sucked to be a house slave in Athens. In ancient Athens, the streets hummed with life. Merchants called out their wares, children played in dusty courtyards, and citizens gathered in the agora to talk politics and philosophy. But beneath this vibrant hum, another kind of life existed, quieter, shadowed, and often overlooked. This was the life of the house slave. In many homes, especially among the wealthier citizens, slaves formed the backbone of daily function. Not warriors or laborers in the fields, but domestic slaves. People who lived inside the home, often sleeping in small windowless rooms, rising before dawn and sleeping only after the last oil lamp had been extinguished. For these individuals, life was not their own. Imagine yourself waking in the pre-dawn hush, the air cool and heavy before the day's heat takes hold. There's no privacy here, no gentle waking. You rise because you must. Tasks wait, and they must be completed with speed, silence, and precision. You might begin by tending the hearth, coaxing embers to life to prepare the family's breakfast. The scent of smoke mingles with stale air, and already your hands are rough from labor. Bread must be kneaded, water fetched, always water. Carried in heavy amphorae from the public fountain, cold against your skin and heavy against your shoulders. The house is not yours, but you know every inch of it. You move silently, avoiding the gaze of your masters. Eye contact can be dangerous, a mistake. Slaves were expected to be present, yet invisible. Some were born into slavery. Others captured in war or sold due to debt. For many, there was no memory of freedom. Life was a series of tasks, of being watched, judged, and too often punished. Punishment was common, and the reasons varied. A broken cup, a misplaced item, a delay. And while violence was a part of this life, we will not dwell on it in detail. What mattered most was the constant sense of fear, of being at the mercy of another's whims. The day stretched long. There were clothes to wash scrubbing cloth against stone, your fingers raw from lye and water. Children to care for children not your own, but whose cries demanded your attention. And there were errands through the bustling city streets where your status marked you. You could be harassed, ignored, or punished, with no right to speak or defend yourself. In some homes, slaves served at the table, pouring wine, cutting meat, always watching, listening, never speaking unless spoken to. Others worked in the women's quarters spinning wool, weaving cloth, tending to the lady of the house, and absorbing her moods and tempers. Perhaps in quieter moments, a slave could rest. But rest was not peace. There was always another task, another need. And while some slaves might earn small favors, extra food, or worn-out clothing, their position never changed. They were property. Even their names were often taken from them, replaced with simple labels or nicknames. Their thoughts, desires, and hopes were not valued. Their lives were lived in service of others, and their worth measured only by usefulness. Imagine the weight of that ... the endless repetition, the absence of freedom, the knowledge that you could be sold, separated from any family you might have at any time. And yet, life went on. There were moments of laughter, perhaps shared with fellow slaves. Small stolen pleasures, a bite of fruit, a brief pause in the sunlight. Humanity persisted even in bondage. But always the rhythm returned: work, watchfulness, and weariness. The house slave's life was not one of epic events or public acts. It was a life lived in the quiet corners, in the shadows of Athenian society, a life largely forgotten, but essential to the comfort of others. As the sun sets over the tiled rooftops of ancient Athens, lamps flicker to life, casting long shadows. The household winds down, but the slave's work is not yet done. The hearth must be banked, the children tucked in, the floor swept. Only then, in the deep night, can sleep come, brief and restless. And tomorrow, it begins again. As the dust of another Athenian day settles, and the noise of the marketplace fades into evening, the soft glow of oil lamps begins to fill the city's homes and courtyards. Now, we turn our gaze to a figure whose presence lingers on the edges of history, a woman who moved between the private world of intimacy and the public world of politics. Her name was Aspasia, Aspasia of Miletus. Her life is wrapped in speculation, admiration, and controversy. Some called her a courtesan, others a philosopher. She was a foreigner in Athens, yet close to its most powerful man, Pericles, the famed orator and leader of Athens during its golden age. But who is she truly? Imagine yourself in a shaded courtyard, vines trailing over stone columns, the scent of crushed herbs in the air. Aspasia may have walked such spaces, her footsteps quiet, her eyes watchful. She was not a citizen. As a woman from Miletus in Asia Minor, she lacked the legal rights of an Athenian woman. Yet she carved out a life of influence in a city where women were expected to be unseen and unheard. Most women in Athens lived confined lives, managing the household, raising children, and rarely venturing beyond the home. But Aspasia's life was different. She operated in the liminal space between worlds, between female seclusion and male-dominated public life. Some sources suggest she was a hetera, a companion, or a courtesan. Unlike ordinary prostitutes, heterae were educated, cultured, and able to attend symposia-exclusive male drinking parties where women were normally forbidden. They were often skilled in music, conversation, and the subtle arts of social influence. Aspasia's wit and intelligence were widely noted. She was said to converse with philosophers, even with Socrates himself. Imagine the soft murmur of debate, the rhythmic clinking of cups, and Aspasia's voice measured, thoughtful speaking of virtue, politics, or love. She became the companion of Pericles, and their relationship scandalized some Athenians. Pericles, a widower, lived openly with her. They may have married in all but name and had a son together, Pericles the younger. This union was not accepted by all. The strict laws of citizenship forbade the offspring of a non-Athenian woman from gaining full rights, and so their son faced limitations, though later exceptions were made. Aspasia's presence in Pericles' life stirred unease. Some accused her of corrupting him, of wielding too much influence behind closed doors. In times of war and plague, when Athens suffered, she was even blamed for its misfortunes, a foreign woman too close to power. But others saw her differently, as a philosopher in her own right, a teacher of rhetoric, and a rare woman who moved freely in intellectual circles. Still, the truth is elusive. Much of what we know comes from comedy, from satire, from secondhand accounts. The Athenians loved to mock, and Aspasia appeared in plays, often caricatured and criticized. Was she truly a courtesan? Or was she a scapegoat, her intimacy with power making her a target? There's no definitive answer. But imagine her, seated beneath the moonlit sky, listening as Pericles rehearses a speech, offering insights, perhaps shaping the very words that would echo in the assembly. Her presence was subtle but real. And when Pericles died during the plague that swept Athens, Aspasia's fate fades from the record. Did she retreat into quiet solitude? Did she continue to teach, to think, to influence? She remains a shadow, neither fully seen nor entirely forgotten. Aspasia's life reminds us of the delicate balance between public and private, between power and powerlessness, especially for women in ancient Greece. She lived not in the open halls of political power, but in the intimate spaces where ideas, desires, and ambitions intertwined. And though her voice is lost to time, her image remains, half remembered, half imagined, but undeniably present. Secrets of the Symposium, pleasure, debate, and sex in elite drinking parties, as night deepens over the rooftops of ancient Athens, and the city's narrow streets grow still. There is one place where laughter still echoes, and oil lamps flicker in rhythmic patterns, casting long golden shadows on painted walls. This is the Symposium. The word may suggest a formal gathering, but for the elite men of Athens, it was something more, an event that blended drinking, conversation, performance, and pleasure. A place where ideas flowed as freely as wine, and where social roles, power, and desire mingled in complex and often hidden ways. Imagine yourself stepping quietly into a symposium room, perhaps part of a wealthy man's home, with stone floors cool beneath your feet and cushions arranged around low tables. The scent of incense hangs in the air, blending with wine and roasted meats. Guests recline on couches, not seated upright. This posture, both relaxed and symbolic, marks the privilege of the free male citizen. Only they may recline at leisure, while others, especially slaves or servants, remain standing, ever attentive. A large mixing bowl, the crater, dominates the room's center. Here, wine is diluted with water, a ritualized act, for to drink undiluted wine was seen as crude, almost barbaric. A slave, perhaps the same house slave who earlier tended the hearth, now ladles wine with care, ensuring each guest's cup is filled just enough. This act of serving is constant, almost meditative. The slave moves quietly from guest to guest, watching for gestures, never interrupting, never speaking unless addressed. Their presence is essential, yet their personhood often ignored. The symposium unfolds in stages. It begins with drinking and toasts, the clinking of ceramic cups, and murmurs of conversation. Topics range from poetry and philosophy to politics and gossip. In some gatherings, men debate great questions. What is love? What is virtue? While in others, the tone is more playful, even indulgent. There may be music, a flute girl, perhaps, playing soft, winding melodies that echo off the walls. She is both performer and ornament, her presence appreciated, yet constrained. Like the slaves, she exists within the symposium, but not as an equal. Entertainment often follows recitations of Homeric verse or lighthearted games. Some symposia include kotabos, a playful contest where guests flick the last drops of wine from their cups at a target, accompanied by laughter and teasing. But beneath the gaiety, there are unspoken rules. The symposium is a place of hierarchy, a microcosm of Athenian society. Who reclines next to whom, who speaks, who listens, all are dictated by status and age. And there is another layer: desire. The symposium was also a space of erotic expression, often directed toward younger male companions, known as eromenoi. These boys or young men, usually in their teens, might attend under the mentorship of an older guest. Their role was complex, a mix of student, companion, and object of affection. This practice, though unsettling through modern eyes, was deeply embedded in Athenian norms, woven into their understanding of love and power. Such relationships were idealized in poetry and philosophy, especially in the dialogues of Plato, where the love between an older and a younger man was seen as both educational and desirable. Yet these encounters, like much in the symposium, were shaped by dominance and control. The younger partner was expected to be modest, even coy, while the older man pursued. Intimacy, when it occurred, was bound by social expectations. Women, too, might be present, but not wives or daughters. Instead, hetairy courtesans like Aspasia were sometimes invited, skilled in conversation and sensuality. Their role was to entertain, to charm, and sometimes to sleep with the guests. But again, they remained outsiders valued yet excluded from true power. And always watching silently, the slaves, pouring wine, clearing plates, carrying out whispered commands. Some might be drawn into the pleasures of the evening, willingly or not. Their bodies, like their labor, were owned. Their consent was not required. As the night deepens, the symposium grows more relaxed or unruly. Wine lowers inhibitions, and conversation may shift to more intimate themes. Songs, laughter, and perhaps weeping fill the room. Not all symposia ended in pleasure. Sometimes tensions flared. Rivalries, arguments, even violence could erupt, especially as the wine took hold. But in many homes, the night faded into a kind of drowsy satisfaction. When the lamps finally gutter and die, and the guests stumble home, the slaves remain, cleaning the mess, tending the fires, and preparing for dawn. The symposium, a place of elegance, intellect, and indulgence, was at once a stage for philosophy and a theater of power. It revealed much about the Athenian world, its ideals, its inequalities, and its many quiet complexities. And now, as we step out of the fading echoes of that gathering, we return once more to the private sphere, to the quiet undercurrent of control and dependency that define life behind the doors of an Athenian home. Citizens and their slaves, power dynamics in the private sphere by day. The city of Athens presented a vision of freedom, the famed democracy where free male citizens gathered in the agora, debated in the assembly, and voted on matters of war, peace, and policy. It was a city that prized liberty and autonomy, a place where ideas flourished. But behind closed doors, in the shaded oikos, or household, a different kind of world unfolded. A world built on ownership, control, and obedience. At the heart of this domestic world was the master-slave relationship, and it was here, in the quiet routines of daily life, that the deepest contrasts of ancient Athens came to life. Imagine yourself in a modest but comfortable home, whitewashed walls, woven mats on the floor, the sound of distant voices drifting in through a lattice window. The master of the house, or kurios, holds absolute authority, not only over his slaves, but over his wife, children, and even adult sons, until they married and established homes of their own. The slave, by contrast, had no legal identity. In the eyes of the law, a slave was a thing, not a person. He or she could not own property, could not marry legally, and could not testify in court unless tortured, a chilling testament to their lack of status. Yet slaves were everywhere. They cleaned, cooked, fetched water, and ground grain. They spun wool, tended the children, and prepared baths. Some worked closely with their masters, serving meals, running errands, even accompanying them to public events. Others remained hidden, laboring in workshops or managing farms. In some cases, slaves were skilled craftsmen, even running businesses whose profits went to their owners. But inside the home, the most personal and, at times, most intimate control took place. Consider the slave nurse, often an older woman, who cared for children from birth. She fed them, sang to them, comforted them in sickness. Her presence was constant. Yet her own children, if she had any, might be sold away, their fates unknown. Or think of the pedagogue, a male slave who escorted boys to school, monitored their behavior, and enforced discipline. He was a teacher and a guardian, but also a servant respected, yet never free. Some households had body slaves attendants who dressed and bathed the master, who were present for his most private moments. The relationship could be one of trust or humiliation, depending on the master's character. And for female slaves, the situation could be even more complex. They were subject not only to endless labor, but also to sexual exploitation. A master could demand her body at will, without consequence. Such encounters were common, and any children born from them belonged to the master's household, not as family, but as property. These blurred boundaries between labor and intimacy, between household and marketplace, defined the Athenian private sphere. There was no escape for most slaves. While some might be manumitted or freed, this was rare and often conditional. A freed slave or metic still lacked full citizenship. They remained outsiders, dependent on former masters or patrons. Despite this, some slaves found small forms of autonomy. A trusted slave might be allowed to earn money, manage affairs, or even save towards freedom. There were stories, quite rare, of slaves who rose to prominence, who bought their freedom, or who were remembered with respect. But these were exceptions. For the majority, life was an endless cycle of command and compliance, of being watched and directed. And yet, there was always humanity, a look, a gesture, a shared moment of humor or sadness between slave and master, or between slaves. Bonds formed despite inequality. A master might grow up with a particular slave, might trust them deeply, might even care for them. But care did not erase control. Even kindness came with limits. A slave could be punished, sold, or dismissed at any time. The master's will was absolute. And so power in ancient Greece was not only exercised in courts and assemblies, but in kitchens and courtyards. In the simple act of ordering food, of giving or denying rest, of speaking or silencing. These everyday actions shaped the lives of thousands, an invisible network of dependency and domination that underpinned Athenian society. Now, as night falls again and the city grows quiet, we step away from these private walls and turn to explore another layer of the ancient Greek world, one where love, marriage, and desire were carefully compartmentalized, each with its own rules, and each revealing the many ways intimacy and power intertwined. Power and passion, sex as control in ancient Greece. In ancient Greece, sex was never just personal. It was embedded in the structures of control, hierarchy, an identity of force, not only of desire, but of domination, regulation, and, at times, even fear. Imagine the city-state of Athens, a society intensely conscious of status, where freedom and citizenship were rare privileges, and where one's place in the social order shaped every aspect of life, including intimacy. To understand how the Greeks viewed sex, we must begin with a fundamental truth of their world. Freedom belonged only to a few. Free male citizens, especially adult men, held authority over others, over women, over children, and over slaves. And sexual roles were expressions of this authority. Sexuality in ancient Greece was less about the gender of one's partner and more about social position and dominance. In this view, the active partner, the one who penetrated, was exercising power, asserting status. The passive partner, whether a woman, a younger male, or a slave, was seen as subordinate. This framework shaped everything from marital expectations to public scandals. A free man's honor was tied to his ability to control not only his household, but his own desires expressed appropriately, never excessively, and never in ways that endangered his status. For example, in pederastic relationships, older men might pursue younger boys. These relationships were not simply romantic or sexual, They were structured, ritualized, and intended to educate and mentor. The older man, the erased, courted, gifted, and guided. The younger, the Arimanos, was expected to be modest, receptive, and eventually grow into the role of an active citizen. These bonds could be emotional, even tender, but they were also deeply hierarchical, and slaves ... had no such protections. For them, consent did not exist. Their bodies were at the disposal of their owners, and sexual exploitation was common. Male and female slaves alike might be used for their master's pleasure or rented out to others. In some cases, entire brothels were staffed with slaves who lived and died in service of others' desires. This was sex as commerce, as command. Even within marriage, power was at play. A wife was expected to submit, to remain faithful. Her sexuality was guarded, her body a vessel for legitimate heirs. A man's fidelity was not required. His authority extended to all aspects of the household, including intimacy. Public discourse reflected this imbalance. Comic playwrights, especially Aristophanes, mocked men for losing control of their desires, for being ruled by lust. Self-mastery Sophrosyne was idealized. A man who could control his appetites, who pursued pleasure without losing dignity, was admired. One who failed risked ridicule, or worse. Yet the laws of Athens seldom punished sexual misconduct unless it disrupted the social order. For instance, if a man seduced another man's wife, he might face serious penalties, not because of passion, but because he had dishonored another citizen's household. In contrast, sex with slaves or prostitutes was tolerated, even expected. Once again, status dictated morality. There was also fear of losing control, of being dominated. To be passive, especially for a man, was deeply shameful. Enemies might accuse one another of effeminacy or submission as a form of insult, a way of questioning their masculinity and fitness for public life. In this world, intimacy was never equal. It was measured, observed, and judged according to one's place. Sex reinforced the order of things, reminding everyone citizen, woman, slave of who held power and who did not. Yet within these constraints, human longing persisted. A stolen glance, a whispered promise, a fleeting moment of connection, these small intimacies defied the structure, even if only briefly. They remind us that even in the most controlled societies, desire could not be fully tamed. As the night winds down and ancient Athens sleeps beneath the stars, we are left with a quiet awareness that passion in this world was not just about feeling. It was about ownership, hierarchy, and the ever-present weight of social order. Now, in our final moments together, we will reflect gently on what this distant world of ancient Greece reveals about power, freedom, and the value of the present quiet around you. And now, as the ancient world slowly fades into the distance, we find ourselves at the edge of sleep. The sounds of Athenian streets, the cries of vendors, the shuffle of sandals on stone, the hushed voices in shaded courtyards have quieted. The oil lamps have gone out, and only the moonlight remains, spilling softly across the tiled roofs and narrow alleyways of a city long gone. What have we seen on this quiet passage through the private lives of ancient Greeks? We have walked the weary steps of house slaves whose lives were shaped by obedience and toil, whose names have been lost to time, yet whose presence filled every corner of the ancient home. We have glimpsed Aspasia, a woman at the edge of power, navigating a society that confined women to the shadows. Her voice was never fully recorded, but her influence rippled through Athens, through its politics, its philosophy, and its private passions. We sat, unseen, in the flickering light of the symposium, where pleasure and thought danced together, where debate mingled with desire, and where the boundaries between companionship and control blurred into the soft haze of wine and music. We felt the quiet weight of power in the home, where citizens held absolute authority. and where even the most intimate acts were shaped by hierarchy, each person defined not by who they were, but by what role they played in the structure of society. And we considered the ways in which sex and dominance were intertwined, not just as personal choices, but as expressions of status and mastery. A society where freedom and desire were measured, controlled, and confined. But through all of this, we also saw glimpses of the human spirit. In every task, in every relationship, in every shadowed corner, people lived, endured, and perhaps quietly hoped. As you rest now, surrounded by the soft stillness of your own world, you can let go of ancient burdens. The weight of obedience, the strict rules of power and passion, they belong to another time. Your world, your bed, your breath are your own. You're free to relax, to let the past settle like dust on old stone, and to drift slowly, gently into sleep. What remains is peace and the comfort of the present moment. Thank you for walking through history with me. Sleep well, and until next time, may your dreams be calm and your rest deep. Good night.